Hi guys, here I am to react to your comments again. Names blocked because I don't want ICE to come get y'all. I think Hak-nyeon is taking a stand for other idols that were dismissed for dating scandals. At some point, the agencies can't dismiss these idols for being human just because they fear backlash. That clause around group image is going to need some more specific parameters put around it to protect all idols better. I agree. Without solid proof, the rumors were really just a dating scandal with a more salacious headline. That's not to say he was dating the Japanese model in question. I just mean people jumped to those sorts of conclusions. The police did eventually clear him of illegal wrongdoing, which makes the situation even more sad. Morality clauses, or public image clauses, are not uncommon in entertainment. It will really come down to how broad the language in the contract is, and what behaviours are forbidden under the agreement. He did issue an apology, which the agency may try to use against him if this goes to court. Prostitution is an exploitative and genuinely evil industry. People take it too lightly. Commodification of human bodies, even if it's self-commodification, is so disturbing. People don't realize how dangerous and vile that industry is for everyone involved. I mean, you can have that opinion, but everyone has the right to choose their own path. A lot of people would say the K-pop industry is exploitative and dangerous, but that doesn't make it inherently wrong to be a K-pop idol. That just means wrong things happen in the industry that we should pay attention to and protect idols from. The same way I don't think it's inherently wrong to be a sex worker, but I also know that wrong things happen all the time in the sex work industry. The goal is to protect workers from the negative aspects of any business, not restrict their autonomy to participate in that business. Just to be clear, I'm mainly responding to the commodification of bodies point. Prostitution is illegal, so this commenter is absolutely right about the risks with that. No, we should not sentence rapists or other criminals based on the victim's wishes. That just gives rapists and other criminals incentive to harass victims to force them to submit leniency requests. We know that many victims are assaulted by family members and other people they know, which incentivize everyone they know to push for leniency. It's also a terrible and unfair burden to put on victims, deciding the punishment of their abusers. I agree, but that's not really what I was saying. When I say I respect what a victim wants, I mean I don't judge them for the choices they make regarding their situation. Victims just want to do whatever they can to move past what happened to them, and I want that same thing. People often attack victims for taking different forms of relief like payouts and discredit their stories if they decide to settle. Victims don't choose the sentencing for their abusers in a criminal case, though. They can submit requests for leniency like Taeil's victim did, but this rarely, if ever, affects the actual punishment, so he'll probably be under the jail as he should be. I just want to make sure we're having grace for the victim and not judging her for choosing to write that letter. That was two heavy topics back to back, so let's move on to something lighter, like laughing at Heejin. Has Min's legal team stepped down? Rumours began flying that Heejin was dropped by her legal team, and the optics of that are hilarious, of course. However, that's not confirmed at all. I didn't report on this because it's mostly speculation. It's true that a request to withdraw was submitted by someone on her team, but we don't actually know who or why. She still has the same law firm as far as I know, and it could just be consolidating work, lawyers switching places due to expertise, or even just sick leave. It's also possible that she did get dropped, but there would have to be legitimate reason for that, like failure to pay, a breach of contract, or them discovering she had been dishonest with them. It's not possible for them to just abandon her case out of nowhere without just cause. That would be a breach of contract and duty. I guess we'll know more at the next hearing. First of all, I agree MHJ is shady. However, until there's a final ruling from the court, we can't definitively accuse her of wrongdoing. Even if there's evidence floating around, context matters, and without full clarity, assumptions can be misleading. Secondly, I do believe MHJ genuinely wants the best for NewJeans. She treats them like her own daughters. That being said, she's also clearly someone who doesn't tolerate being outshined. She'll push back against anything or anyone one that threatens the spotlight of NewJeans. While the group may interpret that as love and protection, it also reflects a narcissistic tendency. She knows the power she holds and the impact her actions have on other groups, yet she still chooses to go ahead with them. Third, the girls have mentioned that continuing to work with MHJ only as creative director is unmanageable. Yes, some argue that she created that situation herself, but again, it's a grey area. That puts ADOR and NewJeans in a difficult position. Creative direction is at the heart of NewJeans, and that identity has always been closely tied to MHJ. She essentially built the brand, the company. Losing that original vision could seriously damage their legacy, and let's be honest, Hybe hasn't produced a culturally defining act like NewJeans in recent years. BTS, TXT, and 17 had already solidified their creative identities before joining or being absorbed into Hybe. The only real value Hybe added was larger budgets and better networking, not artistic originality. This is a long comment, so I'm going to respond to this first half first. We actually do have court rulings that say Min Heejin's actions are what caused her to lose her CEO position. That was an appeals court for an injunction, though, and injunction rulings are inherently temporary. So to be fair, this would technically mean it's not definitive yet until the final ruling upholds or reverses that assessment. However, an objective mind would not handwave evidence, and the analysis of it from multiple judges and legal professionals based solely off that technicality alone. Evidence is not simply floating around, it's being presented in court. I'd agree that she displays narcissistic tendencies, and I think those traits got the better of her in this situation. I'd also agree that Min Heejin was a driving force behind NewJeans' creative direction. However, there's nothing to suggest she couldn't keep doing that without the CEO position. I mean, she worked fine without it for like 20 years in SM. It's more likely that Min Heejin wouldn't settle for anything less than her full reinstatement, and NewJeans knew she would bounce if she didn't get it. So they advocated for that because they were desperate to keep working with her. It's not a grey area to say she caused this dilemma. The court already added some colour to that and said what it was. It's unrealistic for her to remain a CEO in Hybe after everything, but the internal and creative director offer was a great compromise. Many fans, and probably people in the company, wanted her gone completely, but ADOR clearly took NewJeans' feelings and creative colour into consideration. I'll be frank, I don't believe Min Heejin is the end-all be-all for the group. Even if I were to agree that she is, it doesn't change the fact that her being a CEO really isn't necessary for that, and the injunction judges agree. She was given ample opportunity to keep working with them creatively. There's no real excuse. The judges also made it clear that Hybe was the foundation from which NewJeans was created. It's not accurate to say Hybe hasn't produced a culturally defining act like NewJeans, because girl, NewJeans is a Hybe group. That literally is the culturally defining act they created. Anyone who says that Hybe added minimal value to that project and Min Heejin did most of the work has drank way too much of her Kool-Aid. No disrespect to you, of course. The company did its job by seeing the members' potential, seeing Min Heejin's potential, and executing the overall vision. It's untrue to say she built ADOR, because it was Hybe who created ADOR. They literally loaned her money so she could be a shareholder. You could say she built the NewJeans brand, but Hybe literally hired her to do that, bringing together funds, capital, and talent to realize a vision you believe is literally the job of a company, and it's not a small contribution. It's a necessary component. Even Min Heejin admits she needed Hybe for their resources, and that SM never wanted to give her the opportunity to realize her potential like Hybe did. I don't actually know much about Hybe groups. I'm not a Hybe stan, contrary to what some may say. I do know Katsai, though, and they're already beginning to leave their mark on the music industry. Y2K as a concept isn't something MHJ and NewJeans invented, but they made it their own. They embodied it so authentically that it felt fresh and original. That's why so many groups get labelled NewJeans copies. Not necessarily because they're copying directly, but because NewJeans set a new standard. They became the blueprint for success. The reality is, not every group can pull off that concept with the same level of authenticity, but companies try anyway because it sells. It's all driven by capitalism. NewJeans, to their credit, didn't just think about themselves. They stood up for their entire creative team. That's why they acted fast, even if they didn't have all the evidence ready. They saw people around them suffering and took a risk. I believed they hoped public pressure would help them escape without damage or blackmail, but that was not the case. Hybe needed to keep the most successful group name under their label to maintain control. Their intention wasn't necessarily to win in court, it was to preserve their creative integrity, even if that meant losing their careers or financial stability. I don't think they lied about the mistreatment, but they may have moved too quickly without enough evidence, which could backfire, similar to what happened in the Illit situation. Still doesn't mean their concerns aren't real. As a fan, I'll continue to support them. They're truly one of a kind. Some people claim they're replaceable, but the loyalty of their fan base says otherwise. They revived my interest in K-pop in a way I haven't felt since BTS. Their sound is both trendy and timeless, and their concept fits them perfectly. I agree with a large portion of the second half. Some people throw the baby out with the bath, so they don't want to give NewJeans any credit for their past achievements. It's true to say that NewJeans have real cultural impact, and I personally enjoyed their music and concept. They have a very strong and loyal fan base, which I don't think is bad, because fans act as a buffer between idols and the very unforgiving Korean public. That's something that needs to happen. However, I think this comment misses the mark on a few things. You can't in one breath say that NewJeans set the standard and then turn around and cry in a press conference that Illit copied you. If you want to make culturally impactful music, then you have to accept when your music impacts the culture. It's really that simple. When Justin Bieber popped off in the 2010s, he befriended all of his clones like Cody Simpson. Why? Because it meant he was doing something right. It meant he was successful. It meant he had a formula that people wanted to replicate, and imitation is the greatest form of flattery. It just made him seem like a bigger deal. On top of that, he knew he did the same thing. To this day, he'll tell you that he mirrored himself after black R&B artists like Usher and Neo. Both of them embraced Justin, by the way. I will never ever be comfortable with artists who rip so much from black music acting so entitled and territorial over something that was never theirs to begin with. They didn't ask for permission when they took what they took, so why do they expect that from others? Artists who attack their peers for daring to be inspired by them are seen as lacking humility and humbleness. That's because there's nothing new under the sun. If you're truly as unique and groundbreaking as you claim, you don't need to be that insecure that you're taking swipes at other artists in your lane. Even Britney Spears showed love to competitors like Christina Aguilera and scolded the media for pitting them against each other. Her and Christina didn't even have a great relationship at the time, but Britney still rose above it. She always made it clear that there's room for everyone because she knew who she was as an artist and was confident in her own trajectory. By the way, this isn't me conceding that Illit copied NewJeans. I'm saying that none of this was justified even if they did. Then there's the capitalism aspect you highlighted, which I definitely agree with. If something makes money, then it'll be cloned, because that's the game. The music business is a business, and the sharks will start circling if they see something blow up. Heejin herself definitely knows and understands this. She's been in the game 20 years. It was her responsibility to teach the girls about the industry, but it doesn't appear she gave them a real perspective. Hybe didn't fire ADOR's original creative team, actually. Many of them are still in the company. The ones that aren't voluntarily resigned, Heejin included. Hybe just didn't want her as CEO anymore. It's really that simple. It should go without saying that Hybe wants to keep a group they created, a group they invested so much capital in and have a valid contract with. The company has a responsibility to its shareholders and the industry to set this kind of precedent. One of the judges even called it unreasonable for NewJeans to monopolize the group's future revenue. We can talk all day about NewJeans' impact, and I'd agree with you. However, that didn't happen out of thin air. The level of investment, the networking involved, the marketing, these are things that take high-level execution and can likely never be seen again. You can only use the BTS's Little Sisters line once in an effective way. A concept can only really be fresh once. This particular lineup of members will never be seen again. As the judge pointed out, it's not a fair thing to say just make another group. There was no real guarantee that this group was going to work in the first place, and a lot of the resources you used to make it work are gone. Yes, you are absolutely correct in saying Min Heejin was a big part of making this happen. My point is that they worked together, and NewJeans would not be here if they didn't. I also can't buy that NewJeans' intention wasn't to win in court. They literally said they believed they would. To say they did all this from the start knowing they didn't have a case would be you saying they did this in bad faith, which is what ADOR accused them of in court. Even if that's true, I would never admit that if I were them because it just further hurts them legally. Half this video is me responding to this one comment, but I think it's important to highlight the nuances that exist. There are a lot of things on the NewJeans side that I agree with. Those of you who are familiar with the story behind my name know I'm a big critic of capitalism, but I'm also a business girly. Business is the lifeblood of economy, and these faceless corporations employ hundreds, if not thousands of employees that rely on them for income. Hybe is not trying to blackmail NewJeans or damage them. They're trying to protect their investment. It's really just business 101. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to dip for over a week, then return with such a heavy video. It just kind of happened that way. I promise we'll have some fun on the next upload. Take care and be well, guys.